Hello, my name is Sujan Dangal. I work as a researcher at the Center for Research and Development at King's College. So students usually have a lot of questions when it comes to research. So we thought maybe we would dig in a little bit. So we asked students to share their queries or concerns or curiosities about research. So we asked them to ask questions on Instagram. So we've gathered a few questions here, and I'd like to answer a few of them one at a time. So the first one is, what are the websites that one might find full research papers rather than just abstract? That is, I think it's actually quite difficult to get full papers because usually papers are held by websites like JSTOR, Science Direct, and so on. And they usually have a paywall for which you'll need to pay, or your organization needs to, usually universities need to subscribe to those portals for you to get a full access. But there could be some open source resources, open source sites that you could use, but they're not strictly legal. One way to get around that would be to write directly to the authors of papers. Usually that works, especially if you're looking for papers on Nepal. I have personally a few times requested the authors, and they've forwarded their full papers. I'm not sure how pragmatic that would be if you're doing your assignments, if you're looking for papers to do your assignments. The second question is, are there different applications of quoting versus paraphrasing while writing a paper? So quoting someone else's work and paraphrasing, they hold two different meanings, but generally it's usually to give credence to the original author. So when you paraphrase, you take certain key ideas from a research and you present that in your writing, not necessarily directly in the words of the author. But when you quote, it's usually done in a separate indent garera on a second separate paragraph. So these, and when you are quoting, the author is directly speaking. So there is no hard and fast rule as such, but it depends on what kind of impact that you're looking for. Sometimes it's valuable when the author is directly speaking in your paper. Other times you can simply take a key idea and paraphrase that. The other question is, where can I find publications by Center for Research and Development? So one obvious place to do that would be the website of, you could go to King's College's website, find CERAD there, and you should be able to find some of our publications. The other place to find publications from King's is the journal, International Journal for Entrepreneurship and Economic Issues. So you could visit our websites and find some resources there. And there is another question, do I have to write research papers if I join King's? As a student, you could choose to do research papers, you could collaborate with your faculties, you could collaborate with Center for Research and Development and write research papers, but you would have to do a lot of academic writing, which will involve heavy, rigorous research in your work. But of course, it's not obligatory, except if you're doing a master's. We have an MBA requirement where you'd have to do either a research paper, either a thesis, your original research, or a case study to qualify for MBA. How do I publish my own research paper? There are multiple ways to do this. Firstly, you need a research question to work on. So if you think you have a research question, you could dig deeper, look for literature, and figure out what methodology you'd use. Once you have that, you could also look for relevant venues, which would be a journal that could publish it. You could reach out to King's, our own journal, or you could reach out to other relevant journals that publish on the issues on which you are writing. Why do we have to pay for most research papers? Well, the authors don't get paid. Well, this has been a question that is asked repeatedly. It does sound a bit unfair even to the authors. Sometimes you even hear that authors have to pay to get their papers published. But there is no answer to that. I think this has to do with how the market for papers work, which really does not make sense if you ask me. The other question is how to narrow down to a specific, let me rephrase that question. How do I find the relevant literature to cite for our academic writings while doing our assignments? So one problem that most students face is they usually come to teachers and say, we couldn't find papers to cite, what do we do? So I think the obvious thing to do would be to work around with keywords. Sometimes some keywords fetch you good papers, relevant papers, other keywords don't. So you could go to portals like JSTOR or Science Direct or Elsevier, or you could go to Google Scholar, and normally that is the place where you would find relevant papers. But again, you would have to do some iterations with the keywords. And there's a final question: how to make the research process less and more fun? That's a difficult question to answer. I think the one way research could be fun is if you're doing a research on something of your interest. So maybe find something that is of interest to you, even if you're not really interested in the course that you're working on or on the assignment that you're doing, you could probably find ways in which to make it interesting. So maybe you could find some controversial ideas to introduce there, or you could find some contentious issues, you could find some contentious companies or contentious people to work on. So that could be one way. The other is maybe if you could take your research out to the field. So field trips are always fun, talking to people, interviewing face to face. So if resources and your assignments allow that, then that could be one way of making it fun. I think these are all the questions we've gathered. Thank you for sending in the questions.